pineapple under the sea.
SpongeBob SquarePants!
But let's be honest, you already knew that. SpongeBob isn't just a cartoon, it's a cultural phenomenon that has shaped generations with its hilarious characters, ridiculous plots, and somehow deeply relatable moments.
Is this the Krusty Krab?
No, this is Patrick.
Today we're diving deep into Bikini Bottom to break down the show's most legendary characters. In this video you will learn: why is SpongeBob always so annoyingly happy? Is Patrick secretly wise or just really dumb? And how on earth did Squidward become the internet's ultimate mood? Oh, and don't worry, we'll also uncover Mr. Krabs' love for money and exactly how many times Plankton failed to steal the Krabby Patty formula. This isn't just a recap, it's a love letter to one of the most iconic shows of all time. So grab your jellyfishing net, slap on some SquarePants, and let's get ready to laugh, cry, and possibly question why we all relate to a cartoon sponge so much.
Do I get my award now?
And before we start, SpongeBob himself asked me to tell you, press the subscribe button, do it for him, and let's go. Let's start with the man, or rather the sponge, himself. SpongeBob SquarePants. He's the heart and soul of Bikini Bottom, the eternal optimist who somehow makes flipping burgers at the Krusty Krab look like the most exciting job in the world. SpongeBob is basically a giant yellow ball of enthusiasm. He wakes up every day ready to conquer life, whether it's mastering the art of bubble blowing, catching jellyfish with Patrick, or of course, being the best fry cook ever. He even has the golden spatula to prove it. But let's not forget, his over-the-top energy isn't for everyone. Poor Squidward has to deal with SpongeBob's never-ending enthusiasm literally every day. Still, SpongeBob's pure heart often shines through. Remember the time he delivered a pizza with Squidward in pizza delivery? It was supposed to be a simple job, but of course things went completely sideways. And how can we forget his relatable moments of failure, like when he couldn't pass his boating school test for the millionth time. But no matter how many times life knocks him down, SpongeBob gets right back up, smiling brighter than ever. Honestly, he's the ultimate role model for staying positive and believing in yourself, no matter what. SpongeBob's happiness comes from his ability to find joy in the simplest things, whether it's flipping Krabby Patties or catching jellyfish. Sure, it annoys Squidward, but SpongeBob reminds us that life doesn't have to be complicated to be amazing. Just ask his pet snail Gary or his jellyfishing net because they get it. Next up, we have SpongeBob's best friend and partner in crime, Patrick Star. He's a pink starfish with a big heart and an even bigger lack of brain cells. Let's just say thinking isn't exactly Patrick's strong suit. Patrick is the kind of friend who always has your back, even if his ideas are completely ridiculous. Like that time he and SpongeBob tried to sell chocolate bars in chocolate with nuts. What started as a simple business idea quickly spiraled into one of the most chaotic episodes ever. Or how about the time he got jealous of SpongeBob's awards and decided to win one himself in Big Pink Loser? Watching Patrick try to copy SpongeBob's every move was nothing short of comedy gold. Patrick might not be the sharpest starfish in the ocean, but his loyalty to SpongeBob is unshakable. Sure, they argue sometimes, like in I'm with Stupid, but they always come back together stronger than ever. So, is Patrick secretly wise? Well, sometimes. He's had a few moments of bizarre clarity, like when he said, "The inner machinations of my mind are an enigma," or when he encouraged SpongeBob to never give up. But let's face it, most of the time Patrick's just hilariously clueless, and we wouldn't want him any other way. Patrick is proof that you don't have to be the smartest person in the room to be the most lovable. Whether he's coming up with bizarre plans or just being himself, Patrick reminds us that sometimes it's okay to embrace the silly side of life. Let's talk about Squidward Tentacles, the grumpy neighbor, the reluctant co-worker, and the ultimate pessimist of Bikini Bottom. While SpongeBob sees the world as one big opportunity, Squidward sees pure misery. Squidward is a wannabe artist, a self-proclaimed musical genius, and, unfortunately, a cashier at the Krusty Krab. He dreams of fame, fortune, and recognition, but life always seems to have other plans for him. Still, even though he spends most of his time rolling his eyes at SpongeBob and Patrick, Squidward has his moments of greatness. Like in Band Geeks, an episode so iconic, it basically turned Squidward into a rock star. Of course, these moments of glory don't happen often. Most of the time, Squidward is stuck dealing with SpongeBob's antics, whether it's delivering a pizza in the middle of nowhere or being dragged into jellyfishing disasters. But let's be real. Deep down, Squidward doesn't hate SpongeBob as much as he pretends to. In fact, there are moments where he genuinely cares. Like in Christmas Who? When he secretly played Santa to make SpongeBob happy. Admit it, your heart melted a little. Squidward is all of us on our worst days, overworked, underappreciated, and dreaming of something better. But even when life doesn't go his way, he keeps moving forward, clarinet in hand. And honestly, that's kind of inspiring. Now, about Squidward becoming the internet's ultimate mood, it's all about his relatability. Whether he's rolling his eyes at SpongeBob or dreaming of escaping to a better life, Squidward speaks to anyone who's ever been stuck in a job they hate or had neighbors they can't stand. Plus, his sarcastic one-liners and endless frustration, pure meme gold. It's time to talk about Eugene Krabs, better known as Mr. Krabs. He's the proud owner of the Krusty Krab and the most money-obsessed crab in the 7 seas. Mr. Krabs is all about the hustle. Whether he's introducing a ridiculous new menu item, scamming customers with a pay-per-breathe scheme, or inventing outrageous promotions, his goal is always the same: profit. But it's not all about the cash. Deep down, way deep down, Mr. Krabs has a heart. We see it in his relationship with his daughter Pearl, even if their dynamic is a little unusual. And let's not forget his rivalry with Plankton, the owner of the failing chum bucket. These two have been battling over the secret Krabby Patty formula for years, and every time, Plankton loses spectacularly. Mr. Krabs might be greedy, but he's also a hard worker and a surprisingly loving dad. Plus, his obsession with money? Honestly, it's kind of hilarious. And now we arrive at Sheldon J. Plankton, the tiniest villain with the biggest ego. Plankton is the owner of the Chum Bucket, a restaurant so bad not even his computer wife, Karen, wants to eat there. Plankton spends most of his time scheming to steal the Krabby Patty formula. And when I say scamming, I mean building ridiculous inventions like giant robots, holograms, and even clones of himself. None of it works, of course, but despite his evil plans, Plankton is surprisingly relatable. He's an underdog trying to prove himself in a world that's constantly laughing at him. Plus, his relationship with Karen is oddly sweet. Now, let's address the big question. How many times has Plankton actually tried to steal the Krabby Patty formula? Well, we counted. Across the series, Plankton has attempted to get the formula over 70 times. Yes, 70, and has failed every single time. From disguises and robots to elaborate traps, none of his schemes have worked. Poor guy just can't catch a break. But honestly, would we even want Plankton to succeed? His failures are what make him so hilariously lovable. Now, let's talk about Bikini Bottom's most unique resident, Sandy Cheeks, a Texas-born squirrel living under the sea. Yep, you heard that right, a squirrel. Sandy is an inventor, a scientist, and a karate expert. Basically, she's a triple threat. Sandy lives in a giant dome filled with air, which means she has to wear a special diving suit to breathe underwater. And whenever SpongeBob and Patrick visit her, they have to wear water helmets, or risk turning into dried out sponges and starfish. Sandy's Texan pride is one of her defining traits. She's tough, fearless, and loves to remind everyone where she's from. But she's not just about lasso tricks and rodeos. Sandy is also a genius inventor. From her rocket ship in Sandy's rocket to her submarine in Pressure, she's always coming up with wild gadgets. And let's not forget her epic battles with SpongeBob and karate choppers, because nothing says friendship like karate sparring. Sandy might not be a fish, but she's an irreplaceable part of Bikini Bottom. Whether she's cracking jokes or cracking shells, she's always ready to bring the fun. Gary the Snail might not talk much, but he's one of the most important characters in SpongeBob's life. He's SpongeBob's loyal pet, and even though he only communicates through meows, he's surprisingly smart. Gary's calm and collected personality often balances out SpongeBob's chaos. And sometimes, he's the one solving the problems SpongeBob can't handle, like in Have You Seen This Snail?, where Gary ran away and ended up living with an old lady. Admit it, you cried during that episode. Despite being a snail, Gary has some pretty fancy quirks. For one, his shell is way bigger on the inside. He even has a library in there. And let's not forget the time he won a snail race in the Great Snail Race. Okay, he didn't win, but he tried his best. Gary might not get as much screen time as the others, but he's the voice of reason SpongeBob needs, and honestly, the cutest snail in Bikini Bottom. Next up, we have Mrs. Puff, Bikini Bottom's ever-patient boating school teacher. And when I say patient, I mean barely holding it together, because teaching SpongeBob to drive is a full-time nightmare. Mrs. Puff is a pufferfish, and true to her species, she puffs up whenever she's stressed or scared, which happens a lot when SpongeBob is around. Seriously, she's probably the most overworked teacher in Bikini Bottom. Despite her frustrations, Mrs. Puff genuinely cares about her students. Well, most of them. Her dynamic with SpongeBob is a mix of dread and reluctant affection. She knows he's a terrible driver, but she never stops trying to help him succeed, no matter how many crashes it takes. Mrs. Puff might be the most relatable character in the show. She's just trying to do her job, survive the chaos, and maybe one day retire in peace. We're rooting for you, Mrs. Puff. Last but not least, we have Pearl Krabs, Mr. Krabs' teenage daughter. Pearl is a whale with big dreams and an even bigger personality. She's all about shopping, hanging out with her friends, and living her best life. Pearl's dynamic with her dad is hilarious. She loves him, but she also thinks he's totally uncool, especially when he tries to save money at her expense, like in Whale of a Birthday, where he gave her a cheap gift instead of the one she wanted. Spoiler alert, it didn't go well. But Pearl isn't just about teenage drama. She's also super smart and has a soft side, especially when it comes to her dad. Even though they're complete opposites, their bond is genuinely sweet. Pearl might not be as involved in the main chaos of the show, but she adds a fun layer to Mr. Krabs' story. Plus, who doesn't love a good teen versus dad comedy moment? Finally, let's talk about Karen Plankton, the sarcastic, sharp-witted computer wife of Sheldon J. Plankton. Karen isn't just a piece of hardware. She's the real mastermind behind many of Plankton's evil schemes. While Plankton spends his time shouting about stealing the Krabby Patty formula, Karen is the one actually coming up with ideas. Karen lives inside the chum bucket, but don't let her stationary appearance fool you. She's got a big personality. Whether she's teasing Plankton about his latest failure or casually suggesting a genius plan, she's always a step ahead. One of Karen's most entertaining traits is her dynamic with Plankton. Their relationship is a hilarious mix of bickering, teamwork, and surprising affection. Karen might roast Plankton constantly, but at the end of the day, she's still on his side, most of the time. And let's not forget Karen's technical skills. She's packed with gadgets, programs, and even her own mother-in-law protocol, because every villain needs an emergency mother-in-law mode, right? Karen proves that behind every tiny villain is a much smarter computer wife. She's a perfect balance of brains, sass, and just enough chaos to keep things interesting in the chum bucket. So there you have it. SpongeBob's unstoppable happiness, Patrick's occasional moments of wisdom, Squidward's moodiness, Mr. Krabs' love for money, and Plankton's never-ending quest for the Krabby Patty formula. Every question answered, every character celebrated, and every laugh relived. What makes SpongeBob so timeless is how these characters balance each other. They're chaotic, flawed, and sometimes downright ridiculous, but in the end, they're family. Bikini Bottom wouldn't be the same without every single one of them. Whether you grew up with SpongeBob or just discovered it, this show reminds us of something important. It's okay to be a little weird, a little silly, and a little out of the ordinary. Because sometimes the best adventures happen under the sea. Oh, and remember, SpongeBob did ask me to remind you to hit that subscribe button. Because if you don't...
So this is the thanks I get for working overtime.